retrogrades.
How to re-evangelize the de-Christianized West.
Support us in any way you can, most especially by your prayers.
From an authentically Catholic perspective,
Right-minded, righteous group that's equal in strength to the radicals.
from an authentically masculine perspective.
You and your friends versus me and my friends. Bring it on.
Welcome to Rules for Retrogrades. This is Dave Gordon. I'm here with my brother Tim and our friend Chris. Today we're going to be talking about manliness, an attribute sorely lacking in Western culture today, as many of you have likely observed. In the post-conciliar age, there's this phenomenon where piety and religiosity have been mistakenly attributed to the feminine, to the effeminate, right? So I've seen, as you know, Chris and I, we both went to Franciscan University. I've seen too many wimpy young pious men. Too many guys wearing anklets and cargo shorts who look like they've never lifted a weight before and who wouldn't know what to do if they had to get into a fight, to protect themselves or to protect their family. They don't look like they know how to make any household repairs if something broke. They don't look like they've ever played a sport in their lives. They don't look like they know how to approach a girl, get a number, go on a date, shave properly, throw on like a full Windsor tie, and I think that's the big problem for us. It's good to be pious. Obviously, that's encouraged. Men need to be pious because they're the spiritual heads of their household. They need to be able to train their kids and encourage their wives on their spiritual journey, right? This is an absolute necessity. But if you don't know how to do the physical things, then what good is doing all of the spiritual stuff? Man is a composite of a body and a soul. So we can't neglect the masculinity in our bodies and say that we just have masculinity in our soul. It doesn't work like that. You need fortitude, and fortitude manifests itself spiritually and physically. So, guys, I'm going to kick it to you for opening thoughts on that, but that's mine. We need to take back masculinity in the church. In the spirit of that, Tim and I are both drinking a Foster's, one of the manliest beers around. And Chris, I understand you're working with some whiskey tonight, so let's get it kicked off and go to you guys.
Manly big beer, but with a bizarrely small mouth hole. I don't know what that's about. And it makes me feel like Foster's is just flexing, putting on a front.
You're manly with a bizarrely small mouth hole.
I'll take that because that's true. But yeah, you know what you're saying. The simple word for it is nerds. It's been all too easy for the secular left, and I think the religious right, self-consciously, to pitch this as if you're religious, it means you'll be a nerd. If you have fun, it means you are not holy. If you are holy, it means you must repudiate things like anything that the secular world would be attracted to. It is kind of a Protestant notion that they embraced first. The secular world, secular leftists make fun of kind of evangelicals, the Ned Flanders types, because it was designed that way by the Protestants themselves. More and more what concerns me in the Roman Catholic world, particularly in America, where we too often borrow stuff from Protestants. We've been getting this way on Halloween. The Catholics have been becoming more pearl clutchery. To be sanctified in your private life for a man does not mean being a wimp. Actually, a lot of times it's these soft wimps that are the ones, soft little girly men that are addicted to pornography, that divorce their wives. Now it's a lot of maybe strong guys too. But that's not what we're talking about. It's restraint that makes a man hard rather than soft. When I visited you at Franciscan, Dave, I'm just going to say it. I saw little nerdy undergrads running around. I saw a lot of them. And I'm like, first thing when I drove up to that university, I'd never been there. I was like, this is what the ladies are going to get the MRS degree for? Like, sorry guys, you got to kick it up a notch, man. It's not about sprinkling holy water on this or that random mediocre thing and automatically it's good. We can't do that with our bodies or our spirits either. We gotta work on our souls, work toward eudaimonia, perfect ourselves one virtue at a time through habit. Got to get all the virtues individually, just like Aristotle says. And you can't be a little weenie or a little nerd and just be like, but I'm holy. Doesn't work.
When you brought up the virtues, I immediately thought of Aristotle. Right now, I teach ancient history, and we just moved into our Greece section. And Aristotle, obviously, as you guys know, he says that if you need a virtue, say if you need a particular masculine virtue, you got to go find someone that has that virtue and be friends with them or imitate them. Same thing in sports. If you want to be a good athlete, you got to find the athlete that has your body type. As a pitcher, I would always look at different pitchers that sort of had my
boobs.
No, my
endotherm.
Style.
An endotherm.
My pitching style.
Endomorph.
Endotherm
is what we call like hot-blooded, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Same thing.
Hot-blooded. Check it and see.
In the moral
Got
life,
a fever of 103.
Maybe cold-blooded. I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry,
Chris. Go ahead.
Drink Foster's.
Okay.
It's something for beer.
So Aristotle talks about how, if you're lacking a particular virtue, say it's courage, you want to surround yourself with a person that has that particular virtue because you're going to imitate them. So I think what's lacking today is a lot of masculine examples of what it means to be a man. I think a lot of guys are trying to think about what that means and then draw up this image of themselves. But the best way to do it is just find someone that's a great Catholic man and imitate his virtues, especially the virtues that you don't have.
Is the brawny man Catholic? Have we ascertained that? Because he's kind of a recurring theme on our show, partly because of your general similarity in appearance to him, but also just because he seems like he would be number one.
Number one man?
Number one man, number one Catholic. I don't know.
Yeah, you brought him up quite a bit. It's always you bringing him up, by the way.
It's Chris's beard. It reminds me.
I don't think the brawny man has a beard. He's got a mustache.
What are you, crazy? A mustache?
By the way, when you're, as Christians, the man that we should all look to is Christ himself. That's key. Christ himself, which embodied self-sacrificial love, discipline. He was the most religious person out there. So there is this idea that praying rosaries or going to church, it's something that women get into. Oftentimes men like sports and like drinking beer and like being lazy and hanging out at home. But really, the masculine thing to do is to discipline yourself, learn good habits, commit yourself to an intellectual life, prayer, sacrifice. Why is all that important? Because that's what Christ did. He studied the scriptures day and night. He prayed day and night. He went to the cross, and he would go to the cross every single day. So men need to look to him as the primary example, and then to look to the people around you, the men around you that are already living that out. That's a good way to get inspired.
But Christ is the ultimate man. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are used to hearing that part, and I don't feel like that's what's most lacking. That might be the most important part, Chris, but I think what Dave opened up saying, I think the spirit of this show that really impresses people is the idea that we're not Donatists. We're actually skipping the natural virtues of manhood within Orthodox ranks of Catholicism more than the supernatural ones. What I mean to say is, in an age of absconding fathers, we're not Platonists. We don't believe in a unity of the virtues. We're Aristotelians, right? So you got to get all the virtues one at a time. But people are trying to the mediocrity that I see in the Catholic world everywhere. Catholic businesses, Catholic music, even Catholic spirituality. It seems to be that if you say, hey, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it in a really uncool way, I'm going to make a movie and I'm not going to have anything entertaining in it, that people just assume, oh, so all Catholics are duty bound to watch it. It's like, no, it's boring. You got to make it good. You got to make it full of the natural virtues, and grace builds upon nature. That is to say, supernatural virtues build upon the natural virtues. You got to be strong. You got to be funny. You got to have a good personality. Catholic women, we're not talking about this today, but throw some makeup on. I was talking to a patron about, the way that Catholic matrimony works is women look pretty for your men. Stay thin. I mean, your glands or whatever. If you have a glandular problem, that's fine. Stay thin, stay pretty. Men, be strong. It's not necessarily for visual effects as much with the ladies, but it's for the feeling of being looked after and cared after. And you want to be, that's just as many men will say, but that's just the natural virtue. Even the pagans do that. Yeah, you got to do that plus more. Then you build on it with faith,
living
hope, and justice.
Living in LA, that's what a lot of people, this is the fitness capital of the world. Everybody's trying to look good. Everybody's trying to stay thin, male or female. Everybody's trying to get in that perfect body shape. They discipline their bodies every time I go to the gym, everybody's extremely disciplined when it comes to the gym, sweating, they've got their routine, they're locked in, got their headphones in. But when it comes to the moral life, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday even, it's all about committing the most mortal sins you can.
Right. I see.
So there's a coordination. The grace builds on nature, of course, but the moral life is cardinal virtues are also important.
Right. And I see a lot of dudes walking around that are caricatures of what a man should look like. And then they have these shriveled, wimpy souls on the inside. They haven't trained their character. They haven't trained in spiritual discipline, and yet they put all this time in like measuring out how much chicken they're going to eat that night, or how much whey protein they're going to use, or how much weight gain or formula they're going to use. So you have these caricatures of men walking around that basically have the spiritual formation of little boys, and it's pathetic. But that's a really good analogy for what our culture has become. Outwardly showy, but interiorly broken. And Christ is the exact opposite. So St. Thomas tells us that effeminacy is when you're ready to forsake a good on the account of difficulties which you can't endure. So what I was going to say is that Christ is the ultimate man because of Gethsemane, right? Because on his way, to the cross, or on the night before he was to go to the cross, he knew what he had to suffer. He knew what was going to happen to him. He knew the difficulties of Good Friday. He anticipated them. And, that's the ultimate difficulty. Carrying the cross, getting scourged, getting crucified. This is the ultimate difficulty. Why Christ is the ultimate man, according to especially Thomas Aquinas' definition of effeminacy, is because Christ, in view of the ultimate good and his ultimate glorification in the resurrection and the ascension, and the redemption of the human race, he ultimately said, yes, bring it on. I understand there's going to be Good Friday, but ultimately there's going to be Easter Sunday, and there's no way I'm going to exchange or turn away from Easter Sunday just because Good Friday looks hard. But that's what we're at in the West. There aren't very many men like that. People are basically heathens. They're out there to satiate their own desires, to live this hedonistic lifestyle in search of pleasures. They bounce from one pleasure to the next, and you see it in musicians and athletes. They go and they can't get enough sexual fulfillment, so they bounce from one tryst to the next, and that never fulfills them. And people have to be constantly searching for the next pleasure, which is why we've said on the show here that hobbies are getting weirder and weirder, more obscure and more obscure. And it's because in a culture that's devoid of true masculinity, there's going to be this feeling of boredom, this feeling of ennui, and they're going to be bouncing around as pleasure seekers, but never tethering themselves to that which is true good. And
I think you guys skipped something, though. I think you're missing something, though. This is really important. In the popular culture, LA, which is near to me and Dave, it's right there at Chris's doorstep. It's the fitness capital of the world. That's right. That doesn't mean that all those people, there's a really, really easy pitfall, dangerous mischaracterization. All those people are not satisfying the moral virtues. Chris, you didn't say they did, but I just don't want people out there to mishear you. Those people are not sating the requirements for the natural moral virtues. That's only like a couple of
Right.
like the Aristotelian moral virtues are physical in nature. Aristotle talks about the connection between like courage and, you know, you're not going to be able to brave fears you ought to be able to brave if you know you're grossly out proportioned, that the danger facing you is grossly outsized compared to you, etc. But most of the moral virtues that he's talking about are still, I mean, all of the virtues, I should correct myself, that Aristotle talks about are natural virtues, and they are duly, grossly lacking in the West. I mean, things like chastity, that's an Aristotelian virtue. That's not supernatural, right? There might be supernatural graces which help with it, but magnanimity, that is how, magnanimity more than any one virtue is probably how to be a man. Fortitude, braving the dangers you have to brave. These, like what you're talking about, the caricaturized version of a man, Dave. Big, meaty, like, you know, muscle head guys. They think that you solve every problem in life by getting another muscle. You need some muscle, right? You need to get that. But except these are the kinds of guys that would flee in battle, right? Aristotle defines a coward as someone that would flee in battle when it's one-on-one combat. They would flee. Of course, the virtue is the mean, the geometric mean between what he calls cowardice. You wouldn't fight a fight you should, and rashness, where you just rush headlong into a platoon of enemy soldiers. You'll certainly lose your life unless you're like Achilles. Courage is not the midpoint between them, but it's the geometric mean between them, a little closer to rashness than cowardice. Well, you need to be physically fit, but most of these guys that are walking around and are super physically fit, they walk around like this, you know, like certain actors on the set of action films. They're not exhausting the natural moral virtues. And that's, I think, what's really lacking. A lot of guys just try to jump to the supernatural moral virtues, and they're like, why can't I attract a woman? Well, because she wants the natural moral virtues too. Why can't I defend my wife if I have one? Because you didn't get the natural moral virtues. Don't just skip to faith, hope, and love. That's what I meant by you got to be a dude first. Be a dude, be a holy dude, be chaste, but also be tough. Be a good
You can't
boss,
you can't embrace spiritual masculinity without embracing physical masculinity, because there's no split. You know, we're not dualists. Catholics are not dualists. There's not this split between body and spirit. It's why we reject the tranny movement, right? Because it tends to artificially split body and soul. We Catholics, you know, your body should be reflective of your vocation, of who you actually are. So a man needs to look like a man. And I do see at numerous schools too many like noodle-armed, concave-chested dweebs walking around and praying their beads, which, of course, yes, pray constantly. But you also have to, you know, do your other duties as a man, which means if you're looking for a good woman, you know, you're looking for this beautiful bombshell woman that's going to be domestic and is going to be, obedient to you as your wife, to her husband, and she's going to know how to cook, she's going to know how to clean, she's going to know how to change a diaper, then you can't be this wimpy, spindly, pale, pimple guy walking around who doesn't know how to shoot a gun, who doesn't know how to lift a weight, who doesn't know how to fix things around the house, who doesn't know how to hunt and provide, who doesn't know what he wants to do with his life as a vocation. And it's really where there's a tragedy that's happening right now. And I think it's the Hollywood mindset creeping in. You know, I think we've seen too many romantic comedies where the little dork that could, you know, the little, like, shriveled up guy who has never gotten a tan in his life and doesn't lift weights and doesn't play sports, he has the heart of gold, and then the beautiful bombshell girl is really attracted to him because she sees just what a special person he is. No, don't be foolish. That's nonsense. That doesn't happen. Beautiful bombshell women have their pick of any of the billions of men on this planet. You think of the billions of men on this planet that your little heart of gold is going to stand out in a crowd? There's millions of guys with a heart of gold. But among those millions of guys with the heart of gold, also that pool, I'm sure there's a bunch of dudes with the heart of gold that work out, that play sports, that could fix something around the house, that can hunt, that are going to teach your future offspring that are going to be able to teach your future offspring, man skills, who are going to be able to bond with them and bring up strong boys of their own. And that's what the beautiful bombshells are looking for. They're not out there searching for the dweeb with the heart of gold. So I think that's a really pernicious lie, and it's hurt a lot of men. It's stunted the growth of a lot of men. And it's kind of given them a false hope.
Chris, are you one of those men? Or
I am.
No, you're not one of those men. No,
I have a beard of gold.
Well, everyone
I have
here,
a beard of gold.
You do have a
It's more auburn.
golden beard. No, I'm just saying.
I
thought you were gonna jump in. Chris is not one of those men. Chris was let me vouch for the guy. I've been teasing him all show. He was a college pitcher, a good college pitcher. A strong dude, wanted to lift weights. I remember when he first started teaching with me, he was like, "Oh, we got a good weight room. Let's go lift." I was still dealing with an injury, so I couldn't back then. But now that we don't teach together, I miss lifting with somebody. I had a teacher I lifted with last year. And I miss it. I'm just in there alone. If most weeks, 5 days a week. But I wish we'd been able to lift together, bro.
It's nice. It's nice when you lift with like, a friend, or because guys instinctually have to fight for their families and have to fight for the truth and their country. And so competition is a way of preparing them for that, preparing them for the ultimate test. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, so that's what somebody said to me. Somebody said this to me like,
okay, wait.
Wow.
Let's all talk at once. Ready, go.
It's happened surprisingly little on a 3-person talk show. No, people will say this to me. They'll DM me and they'll say, "Hey, you guys all seem versatile." I'll say, "Thank you. It's a compliment." Dave's a great chess player. Chris is a college pitcher. I played basketball seriously. Dave played basketball seriously. We all like to box and lift weights. And me and Dave were both decent skateboarders. But the point is, it's not a bragging session. The point is, there are all these natural muscle memory hobbies that men are absolutely, by their nature, which is to say, the Greek words are their ergon and their telos, right? Their intelligible functionality of their bodies and their goals as men are drawn to. And men are really drawn, and we were all serious scholars. We all love studying Thomas Aquinas, Aristotle, the patrimony of the church, the fathers. There's a wedding of this. This is considered like a novelty when a man is totaled by all of these interests, right? Many of them should be physical, many of them are not. We like to hunt. That's because it's precisely accordant with what a male soul is. We're supposed to do all these things, and yet all of the physical hobbies are more than any other of the desiderata that the ladies are attracted to in a man, aside from he should be the spiritual leader of the home, and he should be good to her. He should treat her decently on a basic level that even the secular humanists get. Above all the rest of those other things, the baseline need at the physical level, the level of a male body and a female body, is to feel protected, right? So what females are looking for are a guy that are guys that are maybe have a little bit of a wild streak, right? A little bit of a strain, not completely safe, not completely G, maybe PG-13. Maybe a guy that's been in some fights. Maybe every girl wants a chaste guy that's not a petri dish full of STDs. That's aspirational, and that's what all men should strive to be. But a guy that's maybe even rated PG-13 or R for violence or the capability thereof, but G for chastity. That's the highest need at the basic natural level of a female, is to be protected. Just watch one of these nature shows, or go to a rally, an anti-abortion rally. You need to be ready to throw down. And there's a lot of bad advice out there by pseudo-Catholic advice, pseudo-pacifistic advice that leads men down the wrong path.
Yeah, so Herbert Jonet says on the duties of the husband and wife, which is, Herbert Jonet is good old moral theology, pre-conciliar, was like the gold standard. He says that the wife has the right to her husband's protection and support. And he also says, under duties of the husband, that the principal duties of the man are the government of the household and family, providing of food, clothing, and shelter. Now, and this isn't some novelty. This is, oh crap, my phone.
It's a novelty ring you got there, bro.
Yeah,
That's the novelty.
this is it's not a novelty. This is just what the church has taught through the ages, right? The husband needs to be able to protect his wife, to lay down his life for the life of his family, the lives of his family, I should say, and to support his family. These are the things that men should do, and they need to have all of the physical tools to accomplish these loftier ends. So if that means you need to be able to protect your family, that means you need to be able to fight. You can't just be one of these guys with the noodle arms that can't curl a 25-pound dumbbell. And you can't be the kind of guy that isn't serious enough about his scholarship and his work. Maybe it's not scholarly work, but work with his hands, that he's not going to be able to provide a living for his family. And you have to be one of these men that commands respect. Now, they've done studies in this. In the military, the actual type of man that tends to be promoted faster has very chiseled, prominent features because he looks like a man. Because there's something in the affect or the visage of rugged masculine men that commands a certain obedience. So if a man's going to be the head of his wife, the head of his family, he shouldn't look like the doughy, go to church and just pick out a random guy. He's probably doughy with like the hiking sandals on and cargo shorts, and it probably seems like he could not bench press the bar.
You definitely don't like cargo shorts, huh?
No, not a big fan.
I'm never wearing my cargo shorts around you again because I know you're gonna judge me. You're gonna judge me.
Well, if I don't
Doughy. You're doughy. You're like, no, bro. I'm in perfect shape. I'm just in cargo shorts. No, it's true though. This is. I think we should devote 10 minutes of this show to this precise topic. Anybody that was forced to read the Scarlet Letter in American Lit, 10th or 11th grade, they all became accustomed and probably sick of this word that Nathaniel Hawthorne kept using, physiognomy, and it means the soul being expressed through the body, usually the visage, but sometimes it can also mean the body. See, when I went on Matt Fradd and I did that interview, everyone jumped all over me when I said, look, these wives are throwing their weight around with their husbands too often. This is something Dave and I address in No Christian Feminism.
Oh, the chubby wives.
And it's going to become, the chubby wives. They jump right. But I mean, I was trying to be funny then. But here's the serious, the intellectual backbone behind all that extra flesh. The extra flesh, metaphorically, is the joking I was making. But physiognomy, with all that extra flesh, one comes to throw their weight around, figuratively, yes, but also literally, right? And it also tells you, because remember, gluttony, this is Chris's point right after I went on, Frad, gluttony can be a deadly sin, can be even mortal. It's not always. It shows a softness and a lack of restraint that almost always translates over, spills over, or if you will, sloshes over into other of the virtues as well.
Muffin tops?
No,
Can we say muffin tops?
I do think I was just going over the 7 deadly sins with my students, and I do think that gluttony is not talked about a lot, and it's one of those sins that's visible. You can. I mean, I have some friends that just always post like the food that they're eating, or I remember in high school we were always eating. Like, you're in sports, so you feel like you always need those calories, but there comes a point in which you're always feeling stuffed. It makes you tired. It makes you lazy, and the big thing, it makes you intellectually lazy too, I think. So
that's right. Yeah.
So but we don't have to couch it. We don't. It's a bodily thing, right? But it's a spiritual thing, but it's also a bodily thing. The point I really wanted to make, just quick, to get it out there, is that when you look at a man like Dave, because I kind of know how the comm boxes work, how the chats work. Dave's making this point about like he goes to church, and I do it too, so I'm not dumping it off on Dave. And people in the chats are going to say, "Oh, he's looking around. He doesn't like the cargo shorts guy with the Teva sandals, and he's looking down on them. Shouldn't he be saying a prayer? Shouldn't he be thinking about Christ's sacrifice at the altar, the bloodless sacrifice? Shouldn't he be thinking of the consecration that we're about to witness? Shouldn't he be preparing his mind?" Yes,
no, he's
but again,
you should not wear cargo shorts at church.
and here's why.
Right.
And here's
That's a
why.
problem.
Because
or any shorts,
but the reason he's thinking about that,
especially jerseys on Sunday when your team's playing.
absolutely,
I see that a lot.
It's not good. It's not a good look. But the reason he's really thinking about it as it relates to that's sort of decorum, right? And decorum can break into the moral realm, but what absolutely does break into the moral realm about a man that is with his wife, and let's say has been with his wife for 20 or 25 years, is that he's grown soft, and it is fair not to condemn, but to adjudge. Notice I'm not using the J word. I'm using the verb adjudge, not to condemn this man and say there's a reasonable probability that this guy's not taking his vocation seriously, right? Same thing as what I said on Matt Frad in reverse with regard to females. If you're taking your vocation seriously, I had a great hour-long conversation with one of my patrons the other day. Best thing that a man can hear is, stay strong. Don't let yourself be comfortable. The best thing that a married woman can hear is, court your husband. Always be trying to win your husband's affection. Husbands, always be trying to win your wife's affections, because it's really, people are lying to you if they say that masculinity is all about just worshiping your wife no matter what and telling her whatever. Those are guys that are addicted to pornography. There's nothing more masculine than a guy that does truly love his wife more than any other living human. And he's not addicted to pornography because he's not afraid to say, look, I want to look at you and you alone, and I'm going to keep myself fit so that I can rip a guy's heart out if I need to defend our home and our family and our children and everything we've worked to build. But I need you to help me with this. I'm being serious now. I was having a little bit of fun with Matt Frad. I need you to keep yourself in shape. I will not look at pornography. I promise you that. I want to look at only you, but we got to struggle to earn each other and to court one another.
Right.
It's
you don't get to look like Jabba the Hutt and be like, only have eyes for me. I mean, you can do it. It's not right or just or fair. There's something to be said. Men who aren't doing their vocation right, who have really, I guess, defaulted on their duties as husbands, fathers. Maybe they're involved in pornography or just aren't being attentive at home, aren't doing their duties at home, aren't raising their kids right, aren't showing their boys and girls love and affection and attention in their own fatherly way. These kinds of men have a guilty conscience. So they're the ones that are prone to fall into the woman worship, which is so prevalent today. Because to assuage their own guilty consciences, they need to pay this, undue amount of attention in these really superficial ways to their wives. So, or
because they have
not
been
superficial
unjust.
ways.
They have been unjust, though.
Right, because they have been unjust, so they have to make it up.
They've been unfaithful.
There's a lot of times when men need to really stand their ground. If your wife has a bad idea, say, no, this is a bad idea. This is not the right idea for our family. A lot of suburban women have their kids in way too many stupid activities, right? We're going to be in Cub Scouts, and we're going to be in this sport and swimming lessons and water polo and all of these things, right, that are just ridiculous. You're robbing your kids of their childhood. They should have time just to lie on their bed and daydream, right? And husbands, maybe the ones with the guilty conscience, or who, for whatever reason, are too henpecked to stand up to their wives, they just go along with these things. They're like, well, my wife takes care of that. Well, your wife, because maybe she's insecure in her domestic duties, or is succumbing to an unhealthy boredom around the house, a boredom that she shouldn't have if she's doing her job right.
An officiousness that creeps in. An officiousness that creeps in when the feminine is trying to be the masculine. Sorry to interrupt.
And coming up with, just ideas. There's too many ideas nowadays. That are not being shot down, and that like because husbands aren't shooting down some of their wives' bad ideas, they're giving ground where they shouldn't. They're not using. Aquinas says the faculty of reason predominates in the man, and which is why he is the head of the household. So we've become a very emotive and sensitive society that isn't being guided by reason, but is guided by unchecked emotion, is being guided by the passions, right? And that leads us astray. The head is the one that says, the rationality is the one that says this is the best end and here's how we're going to get there. So we see a society that's being led astray because of the paths we're being taken down when the woman who is most suited to emote, to be led by her passions, is the de facto head in her husband's absence, because her husband is so caught up in his own vices that he feels that he has to give ground on issues that he shouldn't be giving ground on. Right, guys?
It's a kind of remuneration. It's a kind of unjust remuneration where he's giving ground where he shouldn't because he's standing his ground, so to speak, where he shouldn't.
That's right.
To one of your points, I think that the intellectual life reason is really important, and I feel like that's oftentimes missing in guys. Guys think that the intellectual life is, and I'm serious, I know you guys are going to know that you guys are going to agree with this, the intellectual life is really talking about like the statistics of NBA players and what is it called, fantasy football. And you're like, no, this is my argument. I'm going to actually get passionate about this, and I'm actually going to show you why this is true. Michael Jordan is better than LeBron James, and this is why. Here are his statistics. And they know all the statistics. That's not real intellectual life.
Well, it's not a comparison, by the way. It's not even
yeah.
I mean, so I got to get that out there.
Right. Yeah. The Mamba is probably second.
Yeah.
That's
okay. Okay, hold on one second.
That's intellectualism. It's this stand-in, this fake stand-in that satiates men's desire for the intellectual life, but it's fake, right?
Which we like as well. It just shouldn't be it should be a little rest for the intellect, a part rest for the intellect. We do statistical.
It's not real intellectual work. It's real easy.
No.
It's really easy.
Pseudo.
So there are three levels. This is what I often point out. There are three levels of work, okay, that a man should be about. First is manual work. So if you don't have a manual job, you should still be working out. You should still get outside and I don't know, do something. So manual work, that's the easiest work that's out there. Okay. Yeah. I used to work, my wife's dad is a roofer in Illinois. We used to work in the summer, really hot, 90 plus degrees, super humid. We used to work for 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. In the heat, but I could do that. I could do that for a while.
6 is a pretty short day. I'm just gonna say that. But 7, 8, 9.
But you can't actually. You would literally die on that. If you're on a roof and you're working, you have to take breaks and stuff like that. So
I wouldn't. Just joking.
Yeah, whatever. So So that's the easiest thing. So working for 9 hours on a roof or whatever, or doing some manual labor, that's actually the lowest degree of difficulty. The second highest degree of difficulty is the intellectual life, not the physical life, the intellectual life. The intellectual life is much harder. Okay, so this is why a lot of guys can go to the gym, but if you ask them serious philosophical questions, you're like, hey, so what do you think about the distinction between act and potency? Or just have a conversation about the nature of man or the nature of government, right? What makes a just society? Many guys don't even care about that. They'll just go back to sports. They really don't care about that. They'll never read Tim's book about the Catholic Republic because it just isn't that interesting.
Idiots.
And they'll boast about it too. Oh, I'm not one for intellect. It's like, what do you do? Are you just a sluggard around the house all day? What's your life like?
Wait, you know why?
The intellectual life should also be a competition. Debate is really important. Tim and I got in this debate with some of these trad guys on Twitter, and everybody was like, hey, hold up, let's not frag. I like the not frag, but it's it's good. It's good to get in there. I like that. I wanted to keep going. Say, okay.
No, it's not fragging the debate. It's intellectual fair contest. What's not fair contest is starting to talk about one another personally or our wives. Right, but you know why the guys don't? You know why the guys? This is just a quick point. Some of these meatheads in the gym that, like we go to the gym, all three of us go to the gym, they will admit freely to multiple people in their day, oh, I'm not such a bookworm, or they'll use some term like that. It's because they don't even realize they're making an admission, or they're making they're seeding something that you would not want to seed if you understand eudaimonia, the good life. Because Aristotle says that even the best life, even true eudaimonia, will not appear good to the wicked man, or to the poorly habituated man. So they'll say this not even knowing that they're telling you something bad about themselves. They really are, but they won't even know that it's good. Mark Twain said, if I cannot have my cigar in heaven, I shall not go. He thinks he's being dope or whatever. It's like, well, you're an idiot, bro. You're straight up dumb.
Yeah, the intellectual life is extremely masculine. I mean, that's what makes humans humans. We're rational souls with an intellect. We like to reason abstract concepts on the and to live our lives on the basis of those principles. But here's the third thing, though. The third highest level of work is not above physical, above intellectual, is the interior life. And you can throw the moral life in there. The interior life. Okay, so I could work for Tim, I could work 12 hours a day, man, on the roof in the sun and not take a break for lunch or anything. Okay. So we could play basketball. I was just playing basketball for 4 hours straight on Friday. It's easy. The physical life is easy. It's what comes easy to us. The intellectual life, it's much harder. If I take one of these books and I sit down with it, it's like, man, after 30 minutes, especially with abstract stuff, we were talking about Edward Fazer's Aristotle's Revenge, a book. It's really dense, and so you have to stop. You have to go for like 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and then you have to step back and be like, okay, because your mind's about to break. And as I see the difference between my freshmen and my seniors are able to ascertain an abstract concept a lot longer than so you have to build. It's like building your intellectual muscles. But then, so we could work on the roof for 12 hours. We could even for maybe 2 hours sit down with a book. But how many of us can sit quietly in silence in the presence of God and pray? It's like 10 minutes and I've 30 seconds and I've already got some distraction. Right. To master the interior life, to master the moral life, the interior life is what makes you a man. The physical life, the intellectual life is really important, but the hardest, above all, what makes you a saintly man, is to master the interior life, to sit quietly before God and have him change you. That's what's up. True.
Yeah. And to put into practice what you know from the intellectual life. Having a rightly formed intellect is just conditioned precedent for forming the will, right? You have to let the intellect form the will, not the will form the intellect. So it's conditioned precedent, but the real work starts for men once you've ascertained the truth, which is why, you see a lot of like smug, liberal, quote, intellectuals who live really, really wicked lives, really slovenly and disgusting lives, but they have this air of smugness about them because they think they've achieved some intellectual high ground. And whatever, maybe they wrote a dissertation or a thesis on underwater basket weaving in the Amazon, and they're the peak chief scholar in their field. That doesn't matter. What
Everybody
matters
goes back to basket weaving.
I don't know. It's just there. But what really matters is...
And the Amazon.
And Pachamama. He wrote a dissertation on Pachamama and her naked bosom.
No, that's really smart. That's really good point.
Well, so it takes... What really makes a man is taking the knowledge and synthesizing it and letting it form his will. And the battle to form your will, reading a book's easy, right? It's funny, we're at such a low level of discourse in Western culture that guys think like, oh man, I read so many books. Like, dude, reading a book is easy. Give me 6 hours or something, I'll read a book.
When we talk about the intellectual life, we're also not talking about the Barnes & Noble self-help books. That's huge right now. I see a lot of guys are like, no, I read like a book a day. I'm like, oh, what book is it? It was like how to be a leader in your company. I was like, the words are like this big, and there's like, it's like 50 pages.
Successful
50
people.
pages. And also the intellectual life is not being clever. Some people get away with that. It's like, I'm clever, but really deep down I'm a relativist. And so like I just like posing objections to people, and therefore I'm really smart and I've mastered the intellectual life. It's like, no, that's not what it is. That's not what it's about.
Everyone's met that kind of annoying dude that's like, I don't like to argue, I just like to pose objections. Like, what, you like to annoy people and be
It's about the truth. It's about the truth.
It's about finding the truth. Everything else is sophistry, right?
It's a pseudo
and rile
Socratic method. Yeah, it's like you learned about Socrates once and you didn't understand what his project was. Yeah, it's a great question because Aristotle says in Book 6 of the Ethics, he says that there's only one intellectual virtue that's on
I got it right here.
Ethics, right? It's phronesis. It's prudence.
Sorry.
Yeah, turn it around. Yeah, there it is. That's the is that the W.D. Ross translation? It's literally that prudence is the one intellectual virtue. You go through in books 3, 4, 5, and then again 7, 8. You're going through all these moral virtues, and he goes through the specifics, and he shows you that, hey, to be a good man, you have to habituate the golden mean, which is a geometric mean, between the vice to the deficiency side and the vice to the excess side. But then in Book 6, all of a sudden it sticks out. There's one intellectual virtue, prudence, that tells you how to apply all these moral virtues you might be getting and in what situation. When you're in a bar with your buddy, and your buddy's about to get into a fight, okay, let's say you've acquired the two virtues of amicability is one, where you're like Vince Vaughn in a Vince Vaughn movie. You can talk a situation down. Yeah. You need prudence to tell you, do I pick amicability? That's one of the virtues. Or do I pick fortitude? No, I actually have to throw fists now. This guy just insulted my friend's wife in a really egregious way. Prudence is what tells you which virtue to pick from, and it tells you in real time. See, the wise men, think of the Cours de Ars, St. John Vianney, not a wise man, not a wise man. Even in the rational part of the soul, there's wisdom, which deals with the unchanging topics. So for Aristotle, it's higher, like mathematics or metaphysics. Those truths don't change. Aristotle says wisdom is higher than prudence, but guess what? Prudence is more important to every human being ever because prudence tells us how to get to eudaimonia in real life situations. So in that sense, it's higher.
Wisdom is just the coordination of all four of the cardinal virtues, right? Or what does he say?
Well, no. For Aristotle, wisdom is he gives examples of these people can be non-eudaimonia. Think of the high, the 150 plus IQs of Sigmund Freud, Friedrich Nietzsche, Marx, Engels. All these guys were geniuses, but they were wise. So they're wise by Aristotle's. We're not talking Confucius. They're wise, but they weren't prudent. So they all led lives of either being murdered by someone close to them or they committed suicide, and they probably wound up someplace with a warmer climate. My point is, you could be like St. John Vianney, barely pass the boards to even be a priest, incredibly prudent, and reach eudaimonia. It is a great model for manhood.
Yeah.
Wisdom's not that important without prudence. So you need all the moral virtues. You need to put them together with at least that one of the intellectual virtues.
A lot of people think that Aquinas was that his intellectual life was like the best thing about him, but it was really his spiritual life.
Right.
His moral life and his ability to not just ascertain an abstract concept for hours on end, but to sit in the presence of God. He used to lean his head up against the tabernacle and allow God to enter into his life. I'm not sure that actually had anything to do with what you were just saying, but
how much of that whiskey have you had? It's so beautiful. It's a beautiful.
No, I was just thinking of it. Yeah.
And men need to be position themselves in a place to find their vocation, because obviously vocation increase and perfect your own masculinity, right? So one of the things that people need to hear about is that men aren't doing the right things to put them in a place to find a vocation. And we've already hit on some of those things, and it's like these guys who walk around again, cargo shorts and sandals with the limp wrists, and they're just praying their beads all day. And it's like, look, if you want to be able to grow in your masculinity, you need to be in a place where you can find your vocation. And I'm sorry, you're not going to attract a woman like this. We just need to inculcate some of these masculine skills. And part of the generation is bereft of masculine fathers, because a lot of the spuriously masculine men of the last generation stopped going to church. So we're kind of bringing it around back to what we're saying at the beginning of the show, is that a lot of men, pre-conciliar men, I guess in the post-conciliar age, they gave up. They gave up the act. They stopped going to church. They're like, oh, this is all dainty and effeminate. I'd rather sit on my easy chair and watch football, right? Which is obviously stupid, sinful, awful decision against the commandments, right? But I think that's what happened. And we got a lot of the men that stayed faithful were the betas who went along with their wives, and their wives dragged them to church, but they didn't really much, they didn't have a leadership role in their family. They didn't really have the gumption, the fire inside to bring their family of their own initiative to church. They were more the betas that went and followed their alpha wives. And I think that generation of men has now brought up a generation of boys who they haven't trained how to be men. So to the kids out there, what do you guys say about, because there are probably some kids at the Newmanless schools that are listening to this and like taking off their anklets right now and hurling them into the trash can, right? They're burning their hiking sandals right now. What advice do you guys have for them? How do they capture masculinity?
Do hiking sandals burn? Because they're I mean,
get a hold of Aristotle.
Yeah,
whatever you do.
What I say to my students is this, and I have to be really careful. But it's a nice kind of numbers game you can play, and not directly, apodictically, certainly insult any one person. I say, look, Benedict XVI said that this era is marked by a crisis of fatherhood. He called it the age of absconding fathers. 50% of the fathers just bail on their families and don't even put their heads to rest under the same roof, right? Half of them. But among the half of fathers that are there in under the same roof as their families, 99% of them, or some staggeringly high figure, are simply absent. They're simply present, but in absentia when it comes to actually teaching, what the teaching munus of fatherhood is. It's your role to get your family to heaven and to get yourself to heaven thereby. So they're simply not there.
And if they're not there, then because the thing is, you have to be that, especially for your boys, because if you're not there and you're not doing that, they're going to look for someone. They're going to look for someone else. And that's what you see with a lot of guys. They'll look to athletes or pop artists, or they'll find somebody, or the local football coach or whatever.
Didn't Tupac say that? He said, because we're a fatherless generation of young men, we're idolizing, and I'm paraphrasing here, but we're idolizing people who aren't our fathers, and we're learning what it's to be men from someone other than our father, which is disordered.
Sure. This is the feminization of the feminization of church comes from this. The decent women out there that are actually dragging their young boys to church are without any fault in the entire equation. They're giving the signal to those same young boys that the dragging to church is an effeminate thing. And of course, none of those, we've seen the statistics. I think Pew Research Foundation prints them. When your mom drags you to church, you will not continue to go. It's very unlikely. When your dad drags you to church, it's very, very likely. They did these numbers. This is an obscure statistic, but it's staggering. The process of surrogacy in fatherhood, Chris, is really interesting. We were talking about this with Stranger Things season 1, which is, I still think, amazing. You got these pagan directors, or I don't think they're Christian, the Duffer Twins, and they're putting their finger right on the pulse of the greatest crisis in Western civilization that it's ever faced. the crisis of manhood that Benedict XVI described 10 or 12 years ago. And when men are not teaching their family the natural and then the supernatural virtues, the only people that quote unquote make it, to use a term that probably Tupac used, right, to get out of the spiritual and moral ghetto of fatherlessness, and to just really be swallowed up by a culture, a Baphomet culture that wants to eat us whole when we're kids and teenagers. The only ones that get it are the ones that go through a process of surrogacy, that find a police chief hopper in absence of a real father. And the interesting thing about Stranger Things, I'll just mention it one more time, is, half of the 4 boys come from divorce backgrounds, half of the 4 boys don't. But even the Wheeler family, for any people that have seen Stranger Things, even the Wheeler family, which has the least dysfunctional father there, he's tired, he's old, he's bent, he's broken, and he's not able to teach the real lessons of fatherhood. And so the only way that these boys will survive morally and spiritually is by a kind of surrogacy of fatherhood. It happens automatically.
Going back to your point about why it is that that people fall away when it's their mothers dragging them to church, but not so much when with their fathers dragging them to church. There's a really, really common sense reason for that. It's that when you see your mother doing something, because the passions are predominant in women, you assume she's doing it because she has an emotional attachment to it, and that's a good thing, right? Women are supposed to be warm and emotional, and that's their lot. That's their complementarity with men. But when you see your father doing something, it's true. It makes sense, because your father's not going to be doing something as the head, as the person in whom the gift of reason predominates. You're not going to think he's just doing it because he has some emotional attachment to what happened in his own childhood. You're going to know he's doing it because he has a reason. He knows that God exists. He knows that the Eucharist is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. And when he goes to church, he's doing it out of a sense of duty because it's right. When, if somebody who's overly emotional or who is overly passionate about something, you never know if they're doing something and they really believe it, or whether they just have some attachment to some relic of a bygone age. And I think that's one of our critiques that's been long-standing here on Rules for Retrogrades, or at least back to our initial show, is that a lot of people in the church, it's like, do you really believe? A lot of these bad bishops, do you really believe in Christ? The bad priests, do you believe in what you're saying? And I think the answer for why so many are leaving the church and why we're in an apostate age is that no, they never really believed. They were just doing something culturally, and that has to go.
Who would you rather be evangelized by? An astrophysicist that thinks through things and acts purposively and would not be, quote unquote, wasting an hour a week unless he'd figured this out? Oh, as Michael Knowles said last week, all of it is real. Oh my gosh, all of it is real. Everything that we were raised in the 80s and 90s church to basically soft, low-key think was a joke. Oh my gosh, it's real. This astrophysicist is the one that turned me on. Or would you rather, be evangelized by some emotional person that's been in 6 cults in the last decade and now is just tripped onto Roman Catholicism? You're like, no,
you're talking about yourself?
Pitfall.
No, I think that's why everyone gets. That's why everyone is getting nothing from RCIA. Is because it's exactly the type of person that you described that's in charge of every parish's RCIA basically across the country. It's some weepy, sobby old lady that tells you about her experience of Jesus and what it means to be a Christian. It's like, no, I don't care. For all I know, you're some nut off the street. I want to know what's the doctrine. Give me the proofs for Christ's divinity. Give me the proofs for God's existence. Give me the proofs for why the Catholic Church is the true church. Then tell me what its doctrine is. Tell me what it teaches. Tell me what we're to believe as Catholics. And then let me get the sacraments. And then I want to nary lay eyes on you again.
Okay. So But you're
How
not
do you follow
passionate
that?
about that topic, though, right?
Well, right. I've been in RCIA. I've taught RCIA, and I know who I've replaced in RCIA. And it was very much the situation there. And people are just so glad to have some young man who will tell it to them straight, right? Because they've been, had smoke blown up their rear ends by these flowery old women for so long, and they're starting to connect like the dots. Oh, is there something inherently effeminate about the gospel? No, the gospel is masculine. Preaching the
Totally
gospel is masculine. That's why the evangelists are men. That's why the disciples that were sent out 2 by 2 were men.
Which is why here on Rules for Retrogrades, or at least in our book, it's in my chapters, we call feminism, I do in my chapters, the original transgender. Men acting like women, women acting like men, at the highest munis of what a man can do, which is to bring the gospel. The most beautiful thing a man can do for another man is to bring him the word of God and eventually the sacraments. If a woman starts surrogating for the man in that way, then things don't work out. Yes, it's a supernatural potency of man, but it's a natural means that men have of feeling whether or not that supernatural potency is being adequated, right? That doesn't seem right. That's why it doesn't seem right when you have a female ex-nun, khaki-shorted, Teva-sandaled, spiky haircutted Susan from the parish council teaching you RCIA, right? You know what we need to do though is, and I think we should do maybe a bonus episode or something on this weekend or something like that. We need to do another Catholic dating episode because it will dovetail really nicely with this here. We're kind of focusing on the not oft repeated sort of underside of Catholic masculinity, the not oft repeated sort of shadow side of Catholic femininity, and a third, dating, how Catholic courtship ought to work. That we're giving you the stuff that you'll hear. I've seen many friends in Catholic media say over the past year, I'm going to a conference on Catholic masculinity. You know what? Outside of Rules for Retrogrades, I don't think anyone gets it.
No,
I don't think anyone gets it. They don't get it.
It's all
We should get
the
Pat
false
Coffin on.
ersatz masculinity, where you have 4 of the type of guys that would wear the Teva sandals and the cargo shorts and never lift a weight, or like would eschew learning, would say, "Oh, I'm not the intellectual type." You have 4 of them on a show. I'm thinking it's patronizing for one, and that's exactly not the type of rugged man that I would want to learn how to be a man from. The crossing the goal type men. It's like, is this the best we have? These guys are rehearsed. They're not saying what real men really think about things. What you need is an honest, red-blooded American man, or I guess if you're not in America, it doesn't have to be American, but some guy that's going to give it to you straight, going to tell you what it is. Instead, we prop up these kind of wimpy-ish guys. We'll put a prop beer in their hand, and we'll try and get like maybe one that played college ball or something like that. So he's checking all the boxes, but no one is saying.
Just call me out. If you're calling me out, just call me by name.
And funny man. No, Chris, I wasn't thinking of you.
He's got red hair. He played college ball. He wears glasses.
Looks like Prince Harry. Okay, we're not saying who it is. It's someone that looks like if you mashed Carson Wentz into Prince Harry. I don't know who that could be. Maybe it's Dave or Tim. No, I mean, yeah, that's true. They always get. Shorts. And he's a cargo short wearing ex-pitcher. I'm not going to tell you who it is, and he's a ginger.
We got to drive the point home. In a serious way, even beyond jest. I'm just sick of we've gotten to a point where our culture is so effeminate and the church has been so feminized that our standard for what an actual man is so low. To relay a story, I was playing football at Franciscan University, right? And I dropped the pass and I was like, damn. And some guy, a man, came and scolded me for using the word damn. And I was just like, bro, this is a new low of what I didn't know the crisis was this deep. But
it's deep. You didn't say the Lord's name in vain, right? You didn't say G damn. That would be a mortal sin. Saying damn is not a sin. Sorry, people. You need to hear that. Yeah, and that guy should have been more worried that you're going to bust him in the nose than his pseudo sentiment about your soul. You were not endangered in the soul. I'm really sick of the pearl clutcher stuff. It doesn't work. The old lady, the elderly woman's sentiment masquerading as chivalry.
He should have gone up to you and said, "Why didn't you catch that pass?"
Yeah, right. That's the bigger problem, man.
I would have been like, yeah, fair question. Instead, I was like, get out my face. No, I
should have
no,
caught
Hey,
that
we
pass.
should.
Now you need to go. Yeah.
Two things I wanted to say before we wrap up, just because we're over time. One, I want everyone to check out carryacrosslifestyle.com. These guys are legit. They're helping us out. I wore the T-shirt a couple shows ago, and they have cool fashions. Carryacrosslifestyle.com. Go there. I think my name, Tim, Tim, I don't spell it with two M's, people, is a code for 20% discount. That's point number one. Point number two, we're trying to bring up at the start of this inchoate, amazing show, which is going to be number one in a few short months in terms of Catholic podcasts. We're trying to not irritate you while we still hit you up. Look, please help us with our 3 Patreon accounts. So we figured the best way to do it out there, people, is to put our Patreon accounts at the end, the way we've been doing. But everyone loves our music at the beginning. We're going to try out some new kind of Sonic Cloud type tunes that will be vaguely familiar at the end, and we might rotate them around. So you got to check out. It'll either be this episode, depending on what happens post-production, or next episode. If you wait to the end, you get to hear a new kind of old 8-bit Nintendo kind of song as we put up our Patreon info. But please do.
We also didn't talk about
Twitter,
video games. We should have talked about video games too, but
right. Well, I was gonna suggest maybe if somebody can tell us what level of what video game the song comes from, they get like a free copy of one of our upcoming books or something like that.
Or you can give them that mushroom behind your head.
Oh yeah.
If they guess Mario Kart.
Right. You give them the mushroom behind your head.
All right.
There isn't a mushroom behind his head.
I know.
There's an orange one on
this
head.
You guys have
really,
any
it's
parting shots to take us out?
Don't be a nerd. Don't be a nerd. Be a man. If you want to ask a
fawns.
girl for a date, just say, hey, I'd like to take you out. My interests are purely romantic. I'd like to court you for 4 to 8 months. And then if things work out, then marry you. I don't want to hang out with your friends. I don't want to be friends. I want to court for possible marriage. And don't actually say all this, but this is what should be going through your head. I'd like to take you on a date, and I don't want to hang out with your friends, and I don't want to pretend it's platonic. I'm a good, strong man, and I want to see if things work out. And then what you're thinking is 4 to 8 months later, you want to jump into your vocation as soon as you can. This is how to be a man. But you got to make yourself worthy first. Yeah.
You're saying don't be a nerd. It's like the fawns. You should, instead of saying all that, what you should have done was just hey, I don't know. That was what popped into my head.
I don't do a great A, but
I don't either. But
this will be available soon. No, I agree with you. This will be available soon. Right now, it's just available to our patrons. It's a dope-looking mug. It looks really clean with the white. I'm kind of in the shadow here. Rules for Retrograde's mug with the capuchin monk there in dead form. But we're going to make this available on Teespring more broadly in a couple weeks. We've got to get it to our people first, patrons on Patreon. But except our other 2 people are all of our viewers. Please hit subscribe. Please follow us. And please share, because there are lots of people out there that don't know, that they're just realizing 3 weeks later that I am off TNT and doing this show with the brother and the ginger.
Chris, you got anything for us?
Nope.
All right. Well, that's our show on masculinity. We're going to be following up soon with a dating show, possibly with a show on femininity. Please, like Tim said, please subscribe, share by word of mouth, hit up our
Dave will lead
accounts.
that one. Just kidding. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. No, and we can't reform the culture without first taking back what it means to be a man, and then taking what it means to be a woman back, because these are the things that are going to form the domestic society, and you're going to have a sick culture if you have a sick domestic society. The family's been sick for too long, partly because of a lack of manhood, and a distorted view of what femininity means. So we're going to be restoring that in order to restore the culture. Stick with us.
Peace.